There's a strange moment in life when learning English stops feeling like a choice and starts feeling like a second chance. Imagine being in a place where every single day follows the same routine, the same walls, the same silence, and then suddenly you are told that you can earn a small amount of money each week just by learning English. Not because it is easy, but because it is a way to rebuild something inside your mind that had been stuck for a long time. Now think about what happens at the very beginning. Most people in that situation do not feel confident. They do not feel ready. And the biggest barrier is not the English itself. It is the way the mind reacts. The moment a sentence needs to be spoken, the brain starts translating word by word. It slows everything down. It creates hesitation even before the first word comes out. You might notice this in your own learning too. When someone asks a simple question, your mind becomes busy. You search for grammar first, then vocabulary, then structure, and by the time you are ready, the moment is already past. This is the real struggle. Not lack of knowledge, but overload of thinking at the wrong time. Inside that learning environment, something very interesting starts to happen. A simple interaction like asking for help or answering a question becomes a practice ground for real communication. At first, the sentences are not smooth. They are broken, careful, and slow. But slowly, something changes when learners begin to stop translating and start responding. Instead of thinking in two languages, they start thinking in situations. For example, instead of forming a perfect sentence in their head, they begin to focus on meaning first. If someone asks a question, the goal is no longer to build perfect grammar. The goal becomes simple understanding and natural response. So a basic exchange starts to sound more real. A learner might say, "I need help with this task," instead of trying to construct something complicated. And the response becomes easier to handle because the pressure of perfection starts to fade. This is where transformation quietly begins, not with big confidence, but with small moments of clarity inside real communication. As this process continues, the real challenge becomes less about vocabulary and more about mental speed. In everyday communication, there is no time to construct perfect sentences in advance. People respond in real time based on meaning, not preparation. And this is exactly where many learners feel stuck, because their mind is still trying to prepare instead of participate. But in a real-life situation like asking for information or responding to instructions, something important starts to shift. The brain slowly learns that it is safe to speak without complete certainty. Not every sentence needs to be perfect to be understood. In fact, natural speech often carries small imperfections, pauses, and adjustments while speaking. So instead of waiting for a perfect sentence, learners begin to use simple, direct responses that carry clear meaning. For example, in a practical situation, if someone asks for confirmation or instruction, the response becomes immediate and functional. "Yes, I understand," or "Can you repeat that?" or "I am not fully sure, but I will try." These are not advanced expressions, but they are powerful because they are real and usable. Now imagine a real interaction in a structured environment where instructions are given step by step. At first, the learner stays silent, listening carefully, trying to translate every word internally. But then comes a moment where silence is no longer helpful. A response is needed. And instead of freezing, the learner starts to use what is available in the mind, not what is perfect. They begin to say things like, "I am following," or "Please go slowly," or "I need one more explanation." The language is simple, but the confidence behind it is growing. This is where the transformation becomes visible, not in advanced grammar, but in the willingness to stay in the conversation. The learner is no longer stepping out mentally. They are staying present, even if the English is not perfect yet. And slowly, something very natural develops. The brain stops treating English like a subject to solve and starts treating it like a tool to use. That change alone reduces pressure more than any rule or formula ever could. As this shift continues, the most noticeable change is not in what is being said, but in how quickly it is being said. The hesitation that once filled every gap starts to disappear in small, almost unnoticeable moments. A question comes in, and instead of stopping to build a sentence in the mind, the response begins to form while listening, not after. This is where real fluency starts to feel different. It is no longer about searching for the perfect structure. It becomes about reacting naturally to the situation in front of you. The learner begins to trust simple language because simple language is enough when it is used at the right time. In a real-life interaction, this might look like a short exchange where instructions are given and confirmed without overthinking. A person listens, understands a core meaning, and responds in a calm, direct way. All right, I will do that, or that makes sense, or even I understand now. Nothing complex, but everything clear. What changes here is not English level, but mental pressure. The mind stops blocking speech. It starts allowing speech. And once that happens, confidence begins to grow from experience, not from theory. You may notice that even when mistakes happen, communication still continues. The conversation does not break. This is an important realization for any learner. Fluency is not the absence of mistakes. It is the ability to continue despite them. And in that continuation, something powerful develops. The learner begins to respond faster, not because they memorize more sentences, but because they stop delaying themselves. English becomes less of a test and more of a natural reaction to real moments. So the same situation that once created silence now creates participation. The same question that once caused confusion now triggers a simple response. And slowly, the learner moves from observing English to actually living inside it. This is the transformation that matters most. Not perfection, but presence. Not memorization, but communication. At this point, the transformation feels quiet, but very real. You start to notice that you are no longer waiting for the right sentence before speaking. Instead, you are allowing sentences to form naturally while the situation is already moving forward. That small change creates a completely different experience of English. In everyday interaction, this shows up in simple but powerful ways. A question is asked, and your response is immediate enough to feel natural. Not perfect, but clear. You might say, I will take care of it, or can you show me once again, or I am ready for the next step. There is no internal struggle behind these words anymore. They come out with less resistance. And more importantly, you start to listen differently. Earlier, you were only waiting for pauses so you could translate. Now, you are actually understanding during the conversation itself. Meaning becomes more important than structure, and this makes everything faster and smoother. A full conversation now feels less like a performance and more like participation. You are not standing outside the language anymore. You are inside it, responding, adjusting, and continuing without breaking the flow. Even if a mistake happens, it does not interrupt your confidence the way it used to. You simply correct yourself or continue speaking. The conversation stays alive. And that is one of the strongest signs of real fluency. What once felt like pressure now feels like practice in motion. Each interaction becomes a small step forward, not a test to pass. And slowly, without forcing it, English becomes part of how you react, not just what you study. So when you look back at the beginning, where hesitation controlled every sentence, you can clearly see the difference. It is not about knowing everything. It is about being able to respond anyway. And if you stay consistent with this kind of real, situation-based practice, your speaking ability will keep developing in a natural way. Not rushed, not forced, but steady and confident, one conversation at a time.